Thank you so much for having me. I am going to tell you how fashion can become a climate solution. And this seems odd because when I say the word fashion, I imagine that you imagine a runway with a few garments walking down it, and you're like, how could that ever be, first of all, a climate problem? And then how could it be a climate solution? It's too small. But what I mean when I say fashion is actually every single garment you have ever worn, or anyone in the world has ever worn, all the billions of us. All of our shoes, all of our bags, all of our clothing, all of our hair ties, all of that is inclusive of fashion. Now this monstrous amount of product is a climate problem. It really is. My name is Arizona Muse. I'm a model. I've been a model for 13 years. I've been lucky to be at the core of the fashion industry. My career went very well. I've done campaigns for brands such as Fendi and Chanel and Yves Saint Laurent and Estee Lauder. And one day I realized, wow, I don't know enough about the clothes that I'm wearing and helping to sell. And I started learning. And that was 9 years ago. I've spent 9 years now learning about what clothing really is. Where does it come from and who makes it for us? And I had the biggest penny drop moment where every thread of every story that I was learning and researching brought me back to soil. And I was like, what? Our clothes are grown for us by farmers. Farmers grew my clothes for me. I always knew, like you do, that farmers grew my food for me. Thank you so much, I said when I ate my food. So grateful to the farmers who grew it and the earth who grew it. But my clothes, I thought they came from a shop. They don't come from a shop. There are many, many, many different steps before you get to the shop. So let me tell you the story of a dress. And if you're someone who doesn't wear dresses, don't worry. This applies to any garment that you ever will wear. Perhaps a suit, like the one I'm wearing today. So a dress, let's imagine that it's a cotton dress. And it has a polyester lining, and it has been sewn together with something, right? With thread. And it has some embellishments on it, so some embroidery up here and some sequins here. And then maybe it has a waistband a little bit, so that will be fused. Fusing means that in between two layers of fabric, there's a very fine mesh layer of fabric and some glue. And it just adds a little bit of structure so that you have a more structured shape to your garment. So this dress, it's likely that the cotton was probably grown in China. And then it would have been ginned, I imagine, in China as well. Ginning is the process where you remove the seeds from the cotton fluff and the burrs as well and anything that might have gotten caught in them. So the ginning will happen there. Then perhaps the spinning, all the cotton will be wrapped up in a big bale and sent to Australia to be spun into thread. And then that thread probably will go to Italy, to a factory where it will be either knitted or woven into fabric. Now, it still hasn't been colored yet. It probably will have been bleached already. And the color will be added almost certainly in India, because in India is where most of the dye houses are. And in a dye house, you'll see people with their arms up to here in vats of blue, toxic sludge, basically. Not very healthy. It's affecting their lungs tremendously and the air quality around them. And then also those dye houses, where does that dye all go? The effluents go out of the factory and into the nearest river. If you have a look at those rivers that are near the dye houses, it's a scary sight. They don't look like rivers anymore. They're foaming, they're purple. It's not very pretty. So where were we with our dress? It's blue and it's in India. Now, it might have a zip in the back as well, right? That zip came from metal. Maybe it has a couple of buttons as well at the top, plastic. The metal will have been mined. Maybe it was mined in Uganda. It was mined by people who go underground, possibly with their babies on their back. They spend all day in the mine, taking out the metal, and then they process it with their hands with mercury. Not great for your health either, nor for your environment. They're living in a toxified place. And they're not doing this because, oh, they love mining. They're doing this because they have no other opportunity and because the fashion supply chain holds them in this space. So we still don't have a dress yet, do we? Let's sew it all together, what we have so far. To do that, we'll take it to Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, we'll be in a very, very loud factory with machines everywhere. But the machines don't make your dresses on their own. They have humans running them. And these humans are in this very, very loud, chaotic, often abusive environment all day long. Now it is a dress. At every single stage that I told you about, each material will have been wrapped in plastic, and then unwrapped, and then wrapped in plastic again, and then unwrapped, and then wrapped in plastic. Every single link of that supply chain. So now the dress has been made, wrapped in plastic, possibly for the last time, possibly not, and sent to the retailer who ordered it. Maybe in Europe, let's say. Or let's say in the US, because we haven't included that country yet. So it arrives in the US, and somebody then can buy it. Do you even want that dress anymore? I don't want it anymore. I don't want it because I know the exploitation that happened along its story. I know that those people at every single stage of the way were exploited and abused. They were not paid fairly. That dress did not cost enough. I can almost guarantee you that. Most of our clothing has fallen below a reasonable price. So when we go into a shop and we're like, oh, that's such a good deal, check yourself and think, it's a good deal for me. So does that mean it's been a really bad deal for somebody else and for the planet that we all share? We really must consider fashion as a big climate problem. And remember, fashion is grown in soil. This part of soil is used to grow food. This part of soil is used to grow fashion. We don't even know, actually, what the proportion is of agriculture that is growing food and that is growing fashion. I think that would be a great statistic for us to understand. I hope that somebody in some great university arrives with it pretty soon. Or if it's out there, please tell me, because I haven't been able to find it. So, we have many great things happening in fashion. There is a whole sustainable fashion movement that is rising up to combat this, that has been for years. We're not there yet. We're really, really not there yet. And if you're a fashion person working in a company and you're doing some small changes, great, good for you. But please remember that the time for incremental change has passed. Our window of opportunity that, 40 years ago, if we decided, let's start now, let's do things now for climate, let's rearrange our fashion supply chains so that we can really be climate-proofed by the time we're in the middle of the climate crisis. We didn't do that, did we? We're starting now. So we cannot do incremental change anymore. It doesn't work. We need to change everything, and we need to change it really, really, really fast. And I'm here today to tell you that it is possible. One great example is that over here in the food side of soil, we have a certifying body called Demeter. Demeter certifies the way you grow something, the way you process it, and the way you package it, to make sure that it's healthy for the consumer and healthy for the planet. Demeter is creating new certifications to be able to certify all the fashion materials from the ground where they are grown, up through the processing, remember the story of the dress, all the way to how the garment gets disposed of. Now, the ideal way for a garment to be disposed of is to turn it back into soil. How do we do that? We make sure that it's compostable. And when I say compostable, I don't mean something that's a bit like wet and squishy. I just mean something that has been made without toxic chemicals. So something that is actually food for soil. Soil doesn't have a mouth, does it? But let's really zoom in on soil. What is soil? Soil is a composite material. Soil is made up of trillions per teaspoon of microorganisms. These little guys, they're busy down there, underneath our feet every single day. They are eating and they are pooping. They're having sex and they're making babies. I even believe that they play. Microorganisms, the way we breed them is we make compost. Compost is food and breeding grounds for microorganisms, and the more microorganisms we have in soil, the healthier the soil is. Now, soil, when it's being treated well, let's say it's on a farm. It doesn't have to be on a farm, it could be under a forest too. When it's on a farm and being treated well, it means that we are composting, we're using animal rotation. It's called regenerative agriculture. No harmful chemicals are needed. We don't need the harmful chemicals. Chemicals are only there in agriculture when the system, the ecosystem of the farm is out of balance. That means perhaps there's a monoculture. Imagine a field. Every field is a monoculture. It means one type of crop has been planted. Let's say it's cotton. Cotton, when it's planted all on its own in one huge field, it's like a desert for biodiversity. Biodiversity means the hundreds of species that are all playing and working together in nature. When you put one species of plant, it means that very few species can live in and among it. It means it attracts perhaps one species to live in it, which plagues it. In cotton, it's this little worm that likes to live inside the cotton. Cotton hates it, but can't do anything about it because it's just a monoculture. It has no strength. So you have to spray cotton with loads and loads and loads and loads of pesticides. And those pesticides, they run off from the field into the water bodies, like rivers, down to the sea, down to the oceans. It's not very good for the little creatures who live in the water, is it? These are the impacts that the fashion industry is having. Luckily, the fashion industry has so much money. Billions of dollars a year are going into the fashion supply chain. Let's use that sourcing power. Let's choose to support the farmers who are growing things in a regenerative way, in a nature-friendly way, in order that they reach the fashion supply chain, and then that they go through the processing with non-toxic chemicals. We can dye things without those toxic chemicals. Of course we can. 100 years ago, we didn't have those toxic chemicals, and we all wore clothes, and they were in pretty colors. So Demeter, this certifying body who came over from food, is creating new certifications for things like silk and wool and cotton, so that we can have an industry that not only grows everything with the highest standard for nature, but also processes it with the highest standard for nature, and then also makes it so that it's compostable, so that every garment can be food for those microorganisms in soil. This is a truly circular system. Let's talk about the fashion supply chain just a little bit more. That word supply chain, those links of a chain and the farmers at the bottom of it, that's so disrespectful to farmers. What about a fashion community? What about a supply community? The supply community where the farmer is at the beginning. So different. I'm now equal to the farmer as a consumer. How nice is that? What a different attitude that is to the people along the fashion supply network and community. So how can we turn fashion into a climate solution? We can make sure that all the farms that are growing all of our fashion materials are farming the nature-friendly way. Demeter is going to help us do this. We can make sure that they're farming in a way that increases biodiversity, that increases the soil's capacity for water absorption and retention, meaning no more floods, which also means reduced fire risk. Farming is really causing climate change, or it is a climate solution. The same with fashion. Really, everything we do in life is either causing harm or is a solution. So let's make sure that we stay over here on the side of solution. Now, as a consumer, we can look out for the Demeter little orange flag. You may have seen it on your wine and your food. We can also talk to the businesses from whom we buy clothes, and we can talk to our governments, because we need more regulation. We need to ensure that this industry transitions very, very quickly. So thank you so much for listening to how fashion can become a climate solution.